Commander Zixthala's testimony began 3 cycles after the ceasefire that ended what historians would later call the Terran Integration War. The massive tribunal chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of species settled into their designated sections. The Kethmari delegation whispered among themselves with their serpentine tongues, while the crystalline Vorthak remained motionless in their mineral meditation poses. Everyone present had lost someone in the conflict with humanity. Zixthala herself stood barely 5 feet tall by human measurements, her pale blue skin marked with intricate scarification that told the story of her military career. Each mark represented a campaign, a victory, a moment when she had stared death in the face and emerged victorious. The Coalition had assigned her to study human military tactics after their first encounter with Earth forces at the Kepler Station incident. What she discovered would haunt her for the rest of her considerable lifespan. "The first thing you must understand about humans," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic dampeners, "is that they do not wage war the way we do. When the Coalition encounters a new species, we follow established protocols. We assess their technology, evaluate their military capabilities, and engage in structured conflict with clear objectives and acceptable casualty parameters." She paused, her crystalline eyes reflecting the chamber's bioluminescent lighting. "Humans have no such limitations." The prosecuting attorney, a tall, elegant Altarian with skin like polished obsidian, leaned forward. "Commander, please describe your first direct encounter with human forces during the siege of Proxima Outpost." Zixthala's forearms shifted, a nervous gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the assembled delegates. "We had surrounded their position for 18 rotations. Standard siege protocols suggested they would surrender within the day. Their supplies were exhausted, their ammunition depleted, and our intelligence indicated they had suffered 70% casualties. And what occurred instead? They broke our siege." The words came out quietly, but in the silence of the chamber, they might as well have been shouted. But that's not the remarkable part. The remarkable part is how they did it. Zixthala activated a holographic display that showed the tactical situation at Proxima Outpost. The 3-dimensional map revealed the human position, a small fortified structure surrounded by coalition forces in a perfect encirclement pattern. We had 12,000 troops positioned around their facility. Advanced energy shields prevented aerial bombardment, and our siege weapons were methodically reducing their defenses. By every tactical calculation available to coalition military science, they had perhaps 6 hours before complete structural collapse. The display shifted, showing movement patterns in bright red. At 0300 local time, their remaining forces, approximately 300 humans, abandoned their fortification entirely. Murmurs rose from the assembled delegates. The Kethmari hissed in confusion, while several Vorthak crystals chimed discordantly. "They didn't attempt to break through our weakest point, as military doctrine would suggest. They didn't try to create a diversion or establish a fighting retreat. Instead, they divided into 30 small groups and attacked our strongest positions simultaneously." The hologram showed the human units spreading out like drops of water, each moving toward heavily fortified coalition positions that should have been impregnable. "It was tactically insane," Zixthala continued. "Each group was outnumbered 40-1. They had no heavy weapons, limited ammunition, and many were wounded. By every calculation, they were committing elaborate suicide." "But they succeeded," the prosecutor prompted. "They more than succeeded. In 47 minutes, they neutralized our siege positions, captured our command center, and freed 2,000 coalition prisoners we didn't even know they had taken." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions in a dozen languages while translation matrices struggled to keep pace. The tribunal's presiding judge, an ancient ethereal whose consciousness existed as pure energy within a containment field, pulsed with authoritative light to restore order. Zixthala waited for the commotion to die down. "You want to know how they did it? Do you think there was some secret weapon, some technology we missed?" "There wasn't. She manipulated the hologram to show detailed recordings of the battle. They used our own tactical superiority against us. When Group Alpha attacked Position 7, our forces responded with overwhelming firepower, as doctrine demanded. But while they engaged Alpha, Groups Beta and Gamma infiltrated Positions 5 and 9. When our reserves moved to counter those threats, Groups Delta through Theta struck positions that were momentarily understaffed. A coordination strategy, observed one of the Altarian delegates. Sophisticated but not unprecedented. "You misunderstand," Zixthala replied. "They had no communication equipment. The electromagnetic interference from our siege weapons made real-time coordination impossible. Silence returned to the chamber with crushing weight. They achieved perfect tactical coordination across 30 separate units, over a battlefield spanning 200 square kilometers, without any communication beyond their initial briefing. How do you explain that? The prosecutor consulted her notes. Commander, your report suggests that you believe this represents some form of telepathic ability. Zixthala's scarred features twisted into what humans might have recognized as a bitter smile. I thought so too, initially. I spent 3 cycles studying human psychology, neurophysiology, and cognitive patterns, searching for evidence of latent psychic abilities. And what did you discover? Nothing. Humans show no measurable telepathic capability, no enhanced neural connectivity, no quantum consciousness entanglement. They're telepathically deaf compared to most spacefaring species. Then how do you explain the coordination? Training. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. They call it thinking like your brothers. I observed human military units during peacetime exercises. They spend years learning to predict each other's responses in combat situations. They study together, train together, eat together, sleep in the same quarters, and share every significant experience of their military careers. Zixthala's voice took on an almost reverent tone. By the time they see combat, they don't need communication devices because they've become something more than individuals. They function as a distributed consciousness, each member able to predict and complement the actions of every other member. Surely this is an exaggeration, protested a Vorthak delegate. Its crystalline structure resonating with skepticism. I embedded with a human unit for 30 rotations, Zixthala replied. What I observed defies conventional understanding of individual consciousness. During training exercises, I watched a human soldier named Marcus adjust his position to provide covering fire for a teammate named Sarah before Sarah herself knew she would need it. When I asked Marcus how he knew Sarah's intentions, he couldn't explain it. He said it felt natural. The hologram shifted to show personal combat recordings. Watch this engagement from the Battle of Europa Station. The recording showed a human squad moving through a damaged space station. Without visible communication, they flowed through corridors like liquid, each member anticipating obstacles and threats with supernatural precision. Observe the soldier designated Harper, Zixthala narrated. He changes direction 3 seconds before enemy contact, moving to a position that provides optimal flanking opportunities. He cannot possibly have known enemy positions from his viewpoint. The recording continued, showing Harper engaging targets from the perfect angle while his squad mates moved to complementary positions. Now observe Rodriguez. She provides suppressing fire for 30 seconds, then ceases firing and moves to a new position. Her timing allows Harper to advance without coordination, because she knows instinctively when he needs covering fire and when he needs freedom of movement.
Impressive training, certainly, acknowledged the prosecutor, but hardly. They had never served together before this mission.
Zixthala interrupted. Harper was transferred from the Martian Defense Corps 18 hours earlier. Rodriguez came from a completely different unit, with different training protocols and different tactical philosophies. The implications settled over the chamber like a suffocating blanket. Human military doctrine doesn't create soldiers, Zixthala continued. It creates a collective organism capable of conscious decision-making at multiple scales simultaneously. Individual humans retain their personal identity and decision-making autonomy, but in combat situations, they access what they call unit consciousness. She gestured to another recording. During the defense of Armstrong Base, I watched a human medic named Chen coordinate casualty evacuation across 12 different firefights while simultaneously providing combat medical support and returning fire when necessary. Chen made 237 distinct tactical decisions over a 6-hour engagement, each perfectly integrated with the actions of other unit members. How is that possible? Asked an ethereal observer. Chen explained it to me afterward. She said she wasn't making individual decisions. She was participating in a single complex decision-making process involving every human on the battlefield. Each person contributed their expertise and perspective, but the actual decision emerged from their collective consciousness. Zixthala paused to allow her words to sink in. We assumed human military effectiveness came from superior technology or tactics. We were wrong. Human military effectiveness comes from their ability to temporarily merge individual consciousness into collective intelligence while maintaining personal identity and autonomy. The prosecutor referred to her notes. Commander, your reports describe humans as essentially hive-minded during combat operations. No, Zixthala replied firmly. That's what makes it so remarkable. Hive consciousness sublimates individual identity for collective purpose. Humans do the opposite. They enhance individual identity by sharing it with collective intelligence. She activated another recording showing a human command meeting. Watched General Morrison during tactical planning for the Titan offensive. She listens to input from 37 different specialists, processes conflicting recommendations, and synthesizes a unified strategy. But notice how each specialist maintains their individual perspective throughout the process. The recording showed humans engaged in animated discussion, sometimes disagreeing vehemently, but ultimately reaching unanimous agreement on complex tactical decisions. "This isn't groupthink or conformity," Zixtala explained. Each human contributes unique insights while participating in collective intelligence. The resulting decisions reflect genuine synthesis of multiple perspectives, not compromise or dominance by leadership hierarchy. Commander, are you suggesting that humans represent a new form of consciousness? Zixtala considered the question carefully. I'm suggesting that humans have solved the fundamental tension between individual autonomy and collective effectiveness that has limited every other species' military capacity. She gestured to the assembled delegates. The Kethmare achieve collective action through rigid hierarchy and unquestioning obedience. The Vorthak coordinate through quantum resonance that requires identical thinking patterns. The Altarians use technological interfaces that merge consciousness temporarily. Humans require none of these compromises. They achieve collective intelligence through what they call trust and brotherhood. Each individual chooses to share their consciousness with others while maintaining complete personal autonomy. The chamber had grown completely silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. That's why we kept losing, Zixtala continued. We prepared to fight individual humans with superior weapons and training. We didn't understand that we were actually fighting a collective intelligence that could think and adapt faster than our military computers while maintaining the flexibility and creativity of individual consciousness. "And this is why you're testifying today?" the prosecutor asked. Zixtala's expression grew grave. "No. I'm testifying today because what I've described represents human capability during peacetime operations." Quote, the words hung in the air like a physical presence. "Everything I've shown you, every example of human collective intelligence and tactical coordination, comes from their normal military operations. What I witnessed during the final phase of our conflict, what humans become when they're truly fighting for survival, that's why I requested this tribunal. And what did you witness, Commander?" Zixtala's forearms trembled slightly. "I witnessed humanity at war." The tribunal chamber's atmospheric processes hummed quietly as Zixtala prepared to continue her testimony. She had requested a brief recess, during which several delegates had approached her with urgent, whispered questions. Now, as the session resumed, her posture seemed somehow more rigid, as if bracing against the weight of memories she was about to share. The transition occurred during what humans called the Darwin Gambit, she began, her voice steady but carrying undertones that made translation matrices struggle to capture the full emotional context. By this point in the conflict, we had learned to respect human tactical capabilities. Coalition Command had developed new engagement protocols, specifically designed to counter their collective intelligence advantages. The holographic display activated, showing a star map with multiple fleet positions marked in various colors. Our strategy was simple and, we believed, insurmountable. Rather than engage human forces in direct combat where their coordination advantages were decisive, we would force them to divide their attention across multiple simultaneous threats. She gestured to the map, highlighting 13 different star systems. We initiated coordinated attacks on every human civilian installation within 50 parsecs of Earth. Not military targets, civilian colonies, research stations, agricultural platforms, and population centers. Murmurs of discomfort rippled through the assembled delegates. Such tactics, while not technically illegal under Galactic War conventions, violated the unwritten codes of civilized warfare. The mathematics were straightforward, Zixtala continued. Humans had perhaps 200 active military vessels capable of interstellar operations. We deployed 3,000 ships across 13 systems. Even with their coordination advantages, they couldn't possibly defend every target simultaneously. What was the intended outcome? Asked the prosecutor. To force humanity to accept terms, Zixtala replied. Face the loss of millions of civilians, or agree to coalition oversight of human territorial expansion. The star map shifted, showing human fleet movements in response to the coalition attacks. Instead of the predicted dispersal across multiple defensive positions, something entirely different occurred. Human forces concentrated into a single fleet and moved directly toward the Centauri system, where we had established our primary coordination center. Abandoning their civilian populations?
That's what we initially believed. Command analysis suggested humans had accepted the loss of civilian targets in exchange for a desperate strike against our operational headquarters.
Zixthala manipulated the hologram to show detailed fleet compositions. Their approach seemed to confirm this assessment. They brought every available warship, support vessel, and transport in their inventory. Nearly 400 ships moving in perfect formation toward what they must have known was the most heavily defended position in Coalition space. Surely your forces were prepared for this possibility? We had 8,000 ships defending Centauri, including the most advanced vessels in the Coalition fleet. Our defensive positions were mathematically impregnable. Even if human tactical coordination could overcome normal numerical odds, 400 ships could not defeat 8,000. The display showed the approaching human fleet, a tight formation moving at maximum sustainable velocity. They made no attempt at stealth or tactical deception. No advanced scouts, no probing attacks, no attempts to identify our defensive positions. They simply flew directly at our strongest point at maximum speed. Zixthala paused, her scarred features reflecting the hologram's light. We were confused by their apparent tactical suicide, but prepared to end the war decisively. Coalition Command activated every defensive platform, mobilized every reserve unit, and prepared for the largest space battle in recorded history. And what happened when they arrived? They didn't attack. The simple statement carried such weight that several delegates leaned forward in their seats.
Explain, Commander.
The human fleet arrived at the edge of Centauri space and simply stopped. No weapons fire, no deployment of fighters, no aggressive maneuvers. They sat there for 6 hours while we waited for their assault. Perhaps they were intimidated by your defensive preparations? Zixthala's expression grew haunted. Admiral Chen requested communication with Coalition Command. A new holographic window opened, showing the recording of that communication. A middle-aged human woman in military dress appeared, her expression calm but somehow terrible in its absolute composure. Admiral Chen spoke directly to Coalition Supreme Commander Torgeth, Zixthala narrated. She said, "We need to discuss terms." The recorded conversation began, Admiral Chen's voice clear and steady. "Supreme Commander, we acknowledge that our civilian populations are currently under attack by Coalition forces. We understand that you believe this gives you leverage in negotiations." The Coalition Commander's reply buzzed through universal translation. "Admiral Chen, your position is untenable. Surrender now and we will cease hostilities against civilian targets." "That's not going to happen," Chen replied, and something in her tone made Zixthala's scarring ache with remembered dread. "Instead, I'm going to explain what will happen if you don't immediately withdraw all Coalition forces from human space. You're hardly in a position to make demands." Chen's expression didn't change, but somehow her presence seemed to fill the communication channel. "Supreme Commander, you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about human psychology. You believe attacking our civilians will make us more willing to compromise." She paused, and in that pause, Zixthala had felt the first stirrings of true fear. "You're wrong. Attacking our civilians has convinced us that coexistence with the Coalition is impossible." "Admiral, you have 400 ships. We have 8,000 in this system alone, and 20,000 more across human space. Your position is hopeless. Supreme Commander, you have 47 member species in the Coalition, populations totaling approximately 2 trillion sentient beings distributed across 1,800 systems. The conversation's tone had shifted in a way that Coalition Command protocols weren't designed to interpret. "We have exactly 400 ships in this system," Chen continued, "but we have 11 billion humans in our territories and every single one of them is now committed to warfare. Admiral, threats against Coalition civilian populations violate—"
"I'm not threatening anyone," Chen interrupted.
"I'm explaining reality. You attacked our civilians because you thought it would make us surrender. Instead, you've taught us that this conflict cannot end with negotiation." The recording showed Coalition Supreme Commander Torgeth's confusion as translation matrices struggled with concepts that had no equivalent in Coalition military doctrine. Chen continued, "We're not here to attack Centauri. We're here to show you something." Zixthala paused the recording. "What happened next changed everything I thought I understood about warfare." She gestured, and the hologram shifted to show the human fleet's new configuration. Instead of battle formation, the ships had arranged themselves into something that resembled a sphere. They began broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. Zixthala continued, "Not military communications, but personal messages from individual humans throughout their territories." The chamber filled with recorded human voices speaking in dozens of languages, translation matrices creating a cacophony of overlapping statements.
This is Maria Santos from Lunar Mining Station. They killed my children yesterday.
John Mackenzie, Agricultural Platform 7. My entire family is dead.
Doctor. Sarah Kim, Research Outpost Delta. They targeted the medical facility first.
This is Captain James Rodriguez, formerly of the merchant vessel New Horizon. I watched coalition ships destroy an evacuation convoy carrying refugees. The voices continued. Hundreds of them, thousands, creating a growing wall of sound that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. It continued for 18 hours, Zixthala said quietly. Testimony from human survivors across all 13 attack systems. Personal accounts of coalition military actions against civilian targets. Propaganda, suggested one of the Kethmurray delegates. Designed to demoralize coalition forces. That's what we thought initially, Zixthala replied. But then Admiral Chen resumed communication. The recording reactivated, showing Chen's face again, but something had changed. Her expression remained calm, but her eyes held something that made Zixthala's consciousness recoil.
Supreme Commander, you've now heard testimony from 8,743 human survivors of coalition attacks on civilian targets. Each of these individuals has provided detailed accounts of your force's actions.
Admiral, war is regrettable, but... War hasn't started yet, Chen interrupted. What you've been engaging in is called armed negotiation in human military doctrine. War is what happens when negotiation becomes impossible. The coalition commander's confusion was evident even through universal translation. Admiral, we are currently in a state of declared hostilities. No, Chen replied, and her voice carried absolute certainty. You are in a state of declared hostilities.
Humanity is in a state of preparation. Preparation for what?
Chen's expression finally changed, showing something that made every instinct Zixthala possessed scream warnings about apex predators.
Total war. The recording paused as Zixthala manipulated the holographic controls. Supreme Commander Torgeth asked the obvious question, which was, he asked what total war meant in human military doctrine. The recording resumed, Chen's voice now carrying undertones that coalition translation matrices couldn't properly interpret. Total war means the complete application of human capability to the destruction of an enemy's capacity to threaten humanity. It means the mobilization of every human resource, every ship, every weapon, every individual, and every innovation toward a single objective, ensuring that the threat never resurfaces. Admiral, threats of genocide violate.
I'm not threatening genocide, Chen replied.
I'm explaining the difference between the limited engagement you're familiar with and the total war you've chosen to initiate by attacking our civilians. The coalition commander's growing alarm was palpable. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that you immediately withdraw all coalition forces from human space, provide reparations for civilian casualties, and formally acknowledge human territorial sovereignty.
And if we refuse? Chen's smile was somehow worse than her previous expressions.
Then humanity will demonstrate why we don't have a word for surrender in any of our languages. That's absurd. Every language has words for surrender. Check your translation matrices, Supreme Commander. Zixthala paused the recording again. I was present in the Coalition Command Center when our linguistic specialist ran the analysis, she told the tribunal. Human languages contain words for tactical withdrawal, strategic repositioning, negotiated settlement, and temporary ceasefire. But no human language has a word that means permanent acceptance of defeat. The implication settled over the chamber like a physical weight. Admiral Chen gave Coalition Command exactly 72 hours to comply with human demands. Zixthala continued. Then the human fleet departed Centauri space. Without engaging your forces, without firing a single shot. They simply left. And how did Coalition Command respond? Zixthala's four arms moved in a gesture of profound regret. Supreme Commander Torgeth interpreted the human withdrawal as evidence of their weakness. He believed their display was elaborate psychological manipulation designed to avoid military defeat, so he refused their ultimatum. He ordered increased attacks on human civilian targets. The chamber erupted in harsh whispers and shocked exclamations. Even species that had fought against humanity seemed disturbed by this revelation. What happened next, Commander? Zixthala's scarred features took on an expression of haunted awe. I learned what humans mean by total war. Described the human response. There was no response for 36 hours. Coalition forces continued operations against human colonies, encountering only token resistance from local defense forces.
Command analysis suggested human military capability had been significantly overestimated. She manipulated the hologram to show coalition fleet positions across human space. Then our sensor networks began reporting anomalous readings. What kind of anomalies? Ships. Thousands of them moving toward coalition positions from directions that shouldn't have been possible. The star map exploded with red indicators showing human vessel movements. Instead of the expected 400 military ships, the display showed over 3,000 vessels converging on coalition forces. Where did they come from? Asked the prosecutor. Everywhere, Sixthala replied. Civilian transports retrofitted with military weapons, research vessels carrying experimental technologies, mining ships converted to assault platforms, even luxury yachts mounting improvised missile systems. The display showed the incredible diversity of human vessels, cargo haulers bristling with weapons, passenger liners converted to troop transports, scientific exploration ships carrying military personnel. But conversion takes time, protested a Varthak delegate. Civilian vessels require extensive modification for military operations.
We thought so too, Zixtala replied.
Our intelligence suggested that human civilian vessels lack the structural integrity, power systems, and control mechanisms necessary for combat operations. They were correct, under normal circumstances. What changed? Zixthala's voice took on tones of reluctant admiration. The crews. She activated a new recording showing the interior of a converted human cargo vessel. Instead of the expected chaos of improvised military conversion, the ship operated with impossible efficiency. Watch the coordination. Zixthala narrated. A cargo vessel's navigation system isn't designed for combat maneuvering. Its power distribution can't handle military-grade weapons. Its structural framework can't absorb weapon impacts. The recording showed humans working throughout the ship, their movements displaying the same supernatural coordination Zixthala had described earlier. But, when operated by humans in collective consciousness, these limitations become irrelevant. The navigator anticipates structural stress before it occurs. The engineer redistributes power based on tactical requirements he shouldn't be able to predict. The weapons officer compensates for platform limitations through perfect timing. They made inadequate ships adequate through superior crew coordination. They made civilian vessels more effective than our purpose-built military ships. The recording shifted to show external views of human-converted vessels engaging coalition forces. Ships that should have been destroyed in minutes of combat were outmaneuvering and outfighting coalition cruisers. I watched a human luxury yacht destroy a coalition heavy destroyer, Sixthala continued. The yacht's weapons couldn't penetrate the destroyer's armor. Its speed couldn't match the destroyer's pursuit capability. Its shields couldn't withstand the destroyer's firepower. Yet it succeeded. The yacht's crew achieved perfect coordination with 17 other civilian vessels. Together, they created tactical opportunities that overcame individual vessel limitations. The hologram showed the engagement, 18 human civilian ships moving with liquid precision around a single coalition destroyer. Their coordinated attacks overwhelming defenses designed to handle much larger threats. But this was only the beginning, Zixthala said quietly. The converted civilian vessels were impressive, but they weren't what made human total war terrifying. What was? Zixthala's expression grew distant, as if seeing something beyond the tribunal chamber. The innovation. Zixthala stood silent for several moments, her crystalline eyes reflecting the tribunal chamber's bioluminescent lighting, as if she was seeing through time itself. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that made even the most hardened veterans among the assembled delegates lean forward. Understanding human innovation requires understanding something fundamental about their psychology, she began. Most species approach problems through established methodologies. We analyze, categorize, and apply proven solutions. This approach has served galactic civilization well for millennia. She gestured to activate a new holographic display showing comparative technological development across various species. The Kefmari excel at perfecting existing technologies. The Borthak achieve breakthrough discoveries through collective consciousness exploration. The Altarians develop innovations through systematic research protocols. Humans innovate through desperation. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to conventional understanding. During the first phase of Total War, I was assigned to monitor human technological development from our intelligence station at Wolf 359. Coalition Command needed to assess their adaptive capacity under extreme pressure. The hologram shifted to show intelligence reports scrolling past in multiple languages. Within the first week of Total War, human manufacturing capacity increased by 300%. We assumed this represented mobilization of hidden industrial reserves. A reasonable assumption, noted the prosecutor. Completely wrong, Zixthala replied. Humans didn't have hidden manufacturing capacity. They created it. She manipulated the display to show before and after images of human industrial facilities. Agricultural processing plants became weapons factories. Civilian electronics manufacturers started producing military-grade sensor arrays. Entertainment complexes were converted to spacecraft assembly facilities. Impressive mobilization, but hardly unprecedented, observed a Kethmari delegate. The unprecedented part wasn't the mobilization, Zixthala continued. It was the innovation occurring during mobilization. A new holographic window opened, showing technical schematics that hurt to look at directly. The design seemed to twist through dimensions that shouldn't exist, incorporating principles that violated understood physics. These are weapon designs that appeared in human manufacturing systems 8 hours after total war began, Zixthala explained. None of these weapons existed in human military databases previously. The prosecutor consulted her notes. Commander, are you suggesting that humans developed entirely new weapons technologies in less than 3 days? I'm stating it as documented fact. Zixthala highlighted specific sections of the schematics. This plasma acceleration system increases standard energy weapon output by 400% while reducing power consumption by 60%. The underlying principles contradict accepted physics. Perhaps human scientific understanding was more advanced than coalition intelligence believed? We thought so initially. We assumed humans had been concealing advanced research projects for exactly this scenario. She activated a recording showing a human industrial facility in real time. Instead of the expected teams of scientists and engineers working methodically, the display showed something that defied comprehension. Watch Manufacturing Station 12 during the development of the plasma acceleration system, Zixthala narrated. The recording showed hundreds of humans working throughout the facility, but their coordination went beyond anything previously observed. Individuals at different stations seemed to be working on completely separate projects, yet their activities formed a complex pattern that only became clear when viewed from above. Engineer Patricia Wong is developing improved power coupling systems in Section A, Zixthala pointed out. Physicist Dr. James Chen is experimenting with plasma containment in Section D. Materials specialist Sarah Rodriguez is testing heat-resistant alloys in Section G. Coordinated research teams are common in advanced civilizations. They weren't coordinating through any communication system, Zixthala replied. They had no shared research protocols, no unified project management, no central authority directing their activities. The recording shifted to show communication logs from the facility. Instead of the expected technical discussions and project coordination, the humans were engaged in seemingly random conversations about families, entertainment, and personal interests. Yet somehow, Wong's power coupling improvements were exactly what Chen needed for plasma containment, and Rodriguez's alloy specifications perfectly matched the heat dissipation requirements that neither Wong nor Chen had calculated yet. Coincidence, surely. This pattern occurred simultaneously across 237 human manufacturing facilities, Zixthala stated flatly. Thousands of separate research projects that combined into functional weapon systems without centralized planning or communication. She highlighted timeline data showing the development process. The plasma acceleration system went from theoretical concept to mass production in 41 hours. Standard coalition development protocols for similar technology require between 18 and 30 months. The chamber buzzed with confused whispers as delegates tried to process the implications. How is such rapid development possible? Asked an ethereal observer. Human collective intelligence doesn't just coordinate actions, Zixthala explained. It coordinates innovation itself. She activated a new recording showing human researchers at work. Instead of individual scientists pursuing separate theories, the display showed something resembling a single, distributed consciousness exploring multiple research directions simultaneously, Dr. Martinez in neural interface development instinctively knows that her work on thought-to-machine communication will support tactical systems that Lieutenant Hayes in weapons integration is conceptualizing, even though they've never met and their projects have no obvious connection.
You're describing technological telepathy. I'm describing something more efficient than telepathy, Zixthala corrected.
Telepathic species share thoughts directly, but individual perspectives limit creative potential. Human collective intelligence shares the innovation process itself. She gestured to show brain scan data from multiple humans working on related projects. Each individual contributes unique expertise and perspective, but their creative processes synchronize.
The result is innovation that exceeds the sum of individual capabilities. And this leads to the rapid weapon development you've described?
Weapons were just the beginning. Siegsthaller's expression grew haunted as she activated new displays showing increasingly impossible human technologies.
By day 7 of Total War, humans were deploying defensive systems that shouldn't work according to known physics. The hologram showed coalition vessels attacking human positions, their weapons striking barriers that seemed to exist only when fired upon.
Adaptive shielding, Siegsthaler explained.
The barriers analyze incoming weapons in real time and configure themselves to provide optimal protection against specific attack patterns. Certainly advanced, but the barriers were calculating optimal protection configurations faster than light could travel between shield generators and control systems. The statement created complete silence in the chamber. The physical distance between shield components means that light-speed communication would require 0.3 seconds for coordination across a typical human defensive installation.
The barriers were adapting to weapon characteristics in 0.0007 seconds.
How? Human operators were predicting optimal shield configurations before enemy weapons fired.
Siegsthaler activated combat recordings that showed the impossible phenomenon in action.
Human defensive operators would adjust shield parameters in response to coalition weapon systems that hadn't yet begun their firing sequences. The shield operators weren't reacting to enemy actions, she explained. They were anticipating enemy intentions. Precognition? Pattern recognition perfected through collective intelligence? Siegsthaler replied. Human defensive teams achieved such perfect tactical coordination that they could predict enemy behavior with supernatural accuracy. She highlighted specific examples from the combat footage. Watch Sergeant Kim at Shield Station 7. She reconfigures barriers for plasma weapon attack 43 seconds before coalition vessels enter plasma weapon range. Perhaps the coalition vessels were following predictable attack patterns? The coalition vessels were following randomized attack algorithms specifically designed to prevent pattern recognition. The recording continued, showing human defenders responding to threats that existed only as potential tactical options in coalition computers. By day 14 of Total War, coalition forces were unable to achieve tactical surprise against any human position. Siegsthaler continued. Human defenders anticipated every possible attack approach before coalition commanders had chosen their strategies. This level of tactical prediction seems impossible. It was impossible, according to coalition military science. We began investigating whether humans had developed some form of temporal perception technology. And what did you discover? Nothing. Humans show no signs of enhanced temporal awareness or precognitive ability. Their prediction accuracy comes from perfect integration of tactical intelligence across entire defensive networks. She activated a new display showing the communication patterns within human defensive installations. Instead of hierarchical command structures, the patterns resembled neural networks with every node connected to every other node. Individual humans process specific tactical data streams, sensor readings, enemy movement patterns, weapon signatures, environmental factors. Through collective intelligence, this processed information becomes available to every other human in the defensive network. Shared intelligence networks exist in other species.
Not like this, Siegsthaler insisted.
Coalition shared intelligence systems provide access to collected data. Human collective intelligence provides access to processed understanding. She highlighted specific communication flows within the network pattern. Private Thompson monitors sensor data and intuitively recognizes that specific electromagnetic signatures indicate coalition vessels preparing to deploy boarding parties. This recognition becomes immediately available to Corporal Martinez, who develops tactical responses to boarding party deployment. Martinez's tactical insights become available to Sergeant Wilson, who identifies optimal defensive positions. A sophisticated information processing system. An impossible information processing system. Siegsthaler corrected. The volume of tactical data processed through human defensive networks exceeds the computational capacity of coalition military computers by orders of magnitude. She showed comparative analysis between coalition and human tactical processing capabilities. Our best military analysis systems can process approximately 14,000 discrete tactical variables per second. Human defensive networks were processing over 2 million variables per second. Using what computational systems? Human consciousness. The simple answer created a new wave of shocked whispers among the assembled delegates. Each individual human brain processes between 100 and 1,000 tactical variables simultaneously, Siegsthaler explained. Through collective intelligence, these processing capabilities combine into computational networks that exceed anything in coalition technology.
But consciousness isn't computational processing. Human consciousness is, Zixthala replied. They evolved on a planet where survival required constant processing of multiple environmental threats simultaneously. Their consciousness naturally operates as distributed processing networks. She activated recordings of human combat teams in action, their movements displaying coordination that resembled choreographed performance. "Watch this engagement from the Battle of Titans station," she narrated. 12 human defenders against 60 coalition assault troops in close-quarters combat. The recording showed what appeared to be chaos, humans and coalition forces moving through damaged corridors, weapons fire filling enclosed spaces with deadly energy. "Focus on the human movement patterns," Zixthala instructed. When viewed from that perspective, the chaos resolved into something resembling a deadly dance. Human defenders flowed around obstacles and threats with supernatural grace, each movement perfectly coordinated with teammates they couldn't see. Private Jackson moves to position Alpha because Corporal Lee is advancing toward position Delta, which creates tactical opportunity for Sergeant Brown to establish overwatch from position Gamma, Zixthala explained. None of these individuals can see the other's positions due to structural obstacles. Communication systems? Electronic warfare had disabled all communication systems in the combat area. The recording continued, showing human defenders achieving perfect tactical coordination in complete communication silence. "They're operating as a single organism with distributed consciousness," Zixthala observed. Individual humans maintain personal identity and decision-making autonomy, but their tactical awareness extends beyond individual perception. And this is why coalition forces were unable to defeat human defensive positions? This is why coalition forces began experiencing cascade morale failures, Zixthala replied grimly. She activated psychological evaluation reports from coalition medical facilities. Combat stress casualties among coalition forces increased by 800% during the first month of total war.
Due to the intensity of combat? Due to the impossibility of combat, Zixthala corrected.
Coalition soldiers began reporting that fighting humans felt like fighting supernatural entities. The psychological reports showed testimony from coalition veterans describing their experience in combat against human forces. "They know what you're going to do before you know it yourself. It's like fighting ghosts that can predict the future. They're always exactly where they need to be, and never where you expect them. You can't surprise them, can't outmaneuver them, can't coordinate faster than they can respond." Coalition military doctrine is based on achieving tactical advantages through superior planning, coordination, and execution, Zixthala explained. Against humans, these advantages became liabilities.
How so? Human collective intelligence turns tactical complexity into tactical opportunity.
The more sophisticated our attack plans, the more vulnerable they became to human response. She showed comparative analyses of coalition attack success rates over time. During the first week of conflict, standard coalition tactics achieved 63% success rates against human positions. By week 4, success rates had dropped to 8%. Humans learned to counter coalition tactics. Humans learned to predict coalition tactics, Zixthala replied. By week 6, they were developing countermeasures to tactics that existed only as theoretical possibilities in coalition strategic databases.
The implications were staggering.
Human forces weren't just responding to coalition strategies. They were anticipating strategies that coalition commanders hadn't yet considered. This created a psychological effect among coalition forces that military medicine had never encountered. Zixthala continued. What kind of effect? Tactical helplessness syndrome. The complete breakdown of military confidence when soldiers believe that victory is impossible regardless of their actions. She activated medical reports showing the symptoms: paralysis in combat situations, inability to make tactical decisions, complete loss of aggressive capability. Coalition soldiers began refusing combat operations against human forces, Zixthala revealed. Not due to cowardice, but due to rational assessment that engagement was futile. How did Coalition Command respond? By escalating to weapons of mass destruction. The words dropped into the chamber's silence like stones into a deep well. The tribunal chamber seemed to shrink as Zixthala's words settled over the assembled delegates. The revelation that Coalition Command had escalated to weapons of mass destruction struck like a physical blow, causing representatives from multiple species to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Even the ethereal judges, beings of pure energy who rarely showed emotion, pulsed with what could only be interpreted as distress. The decision to deploy stellar disruption weapons was not made lightly, Zixthala continued, her voice carrying the weight of remembered horror. Coalition Command had exhausted all conventional military options. Human defensive capabilities had made standard warfare ineffective,
and our casualty rates were approaching levels that threatened coalition military structure itself. She activated a holographic display showing casualty statistics that painted a grim picture, coalition losses mounting exponentially while human casualties remained surprisingly low. In 6 weeks of total war, coalition forces had suffered over 2 million casualties while successfully eliminating fewer than 50,000 human combatants, she explained. These numbers represented complete reversal of expected outcomes based on numerical superiority and technological advantages. What prompted the decision to escalate to stellar weapons? Asked the prosecutor. The realization that humans were not simply winning through defensive superiority, Zixthala replied. They were learning. She manipulated the hologram to show comparative combat effectiveness over time. Instead of static defensive success, the data revealed human capabilities growing stronger with each engagement. Human defensive networks weren't just maintaining their tactical advantages, she explained. They were improving them. Each coalition attack provided humans with additional tactical data that enhanced their collective intelligence capabilities. They were using coalition attacks as training exercises? They were using coalition attacks as evolutionary pressure, Zixthala corrected. Human collective intelligence adapted to counter our tactics, then developed countermeasures to tactics we hadn't yet considered. The display showed projection models that coalition strategic computers had generated. Instead of eventual coalition victory through sustained pressure, the models predicted human capabilities continuing to expand indefinitely. Our strategic analysis suggested that within 6 months, human defensive networks would achieve tactical omniscience within their operational areas, Zixthala continued. Complete awareness of all possible tactical options and optimal responses to every conceivable threat. Surely that's hyperbole. Coalition Strategic Command doesn't engage in hyperbole, Zixthala replied grimly. The mathematical models were clear. Human collective intelligence was approaching theoretical limits of tactical coordination. She highlighted specific projection data. Human defensive networks were processing tactical information at rates approaching quantum computational capacity. Their response times to new threats were decreasing exponentially. Their predictive accuracy was approaching theoretical maximums.
And this prompted the decision to use stellar weapons? This prompted the realization that conventional warfare against humans might be impossible to win.
Zixthala's expression grew haunted as she activated recordings from Coalition Command strategic sessions. The voices of Coalition military leadership carried tones of growing desperation as they discussed options that grew increasingly extreme.
Supreme Commander Torgeth consulted with strategic advisors from all member species, she explained. The unanimous conclusion was that human collective intelligence represented an evolutionary advantage that conventional military doctrine couldn't overcome. So they decided to eliminate the advantage through stellar bombardment. They decided to eliminate human civilization entirely. The statement created a ripple of shocked silence through the chamber. Even species that had fought against humanity seemed disturbed by the implications of targeting entire star systems. The Stellar Disruption Protocol was designed to destabilize Sol, causing the star to emit lethal radiation across the entire human home system. Zixthala continued. This would eliminate not just human military capability, but human civilization itself. A genocidal solution, observed one of the Altarian delegates. A desperate solution, Zixthala corrected. Coalition Command had concluded that coexistence with human military capabilities was impossible. Their collective intelligence advantages would eventually threaten every other species in the galaxy. She activated tactical projections showing human capability expansion over longer time periods. The models were terrifying in their implications. Human collective intelligence continuing to evolve and improve, eventually achieving capabilities that dwarfed anything in galactic civilization. These projections suggested that within 50 years, humans would possess tactical capabilities that made resistance from any other species futile, Zixthala explained. Coalition Command believed they were fighting not just a war, but an extinction event. And how did they plan to implement stellar disruption? Through the Omega Protocol, she replied, activating technical specifications for weapons that hurt to look at directly. Stellar disruption requires precise gravitational manipulation to destabilize nuclear fusion processes. The Coalition had developed this technology for theoretical stellar engineering projects. Had it ever been tested? Never on inhabited systems. The ethical protocols of galactic civilization had prevented such applications. But they were prepared to use it against Earth? They were prepared to use it against Sol, Zixthala corrected. Earth was simply one of several planets that would be rendered uninhabitable. The technical specifications showed weapons capable of manipulating gravitational fields across interstellar distances. The implications went beyond simple planetary destruction to the elimination of entire star systems. The deployment was scheduled for Day 63 of Total War, Zixtala continued. Coalition Command had concluded that this timeline would prevent human collective intelligence from developing countermeasures to stellar disruption weapons. They were wrong? They were catastrophically wrong. Zixtala activated new displays showing human activity during the period leading up to the planned stellar bombardment. Instead of the expected defensive preparations, humans were engaged in activities that defied comprehension. Human manufacturing capacity had increased by over 1,000% by Day 50 of Total War, she explained. But they weren't producing weapons or defensive systems. What were they producing? Spacecraft.
Hundreds of thousands of them.
The holographic display showed human industrial systems operating at impossible efficiency levels, producing ships at rates that exceeded theoretical manufacturing capacity. Every human manufacturing facility, from major industrial complexes to individual workshops, was producing spacecraft, Zixtala continued. Not military vessels, but transport ships designed for maximum capacity and efficiency. Evacuation preparations? That's what Coalition intelligence initially believed. Humans were attempting to evacuate their population before stellar disruption eliminated their home system. She manipulated the display to show human population centers during this period. Instead of panic or evacuation procedures, the images revealed something entirely different. Human civilian populations were volunteering for what they called colonization duty, Zixtal explained. Entire families boarding transport ships not to escape destruction, but to establish new human settlements throughout the galaxy. Colonization during wartime seems impractical. It wasn't colonization, Zixtala realized. It was reproduction. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to conventional understanding of warfare. Humans weren't trying to preserve their existing civilization through evacuation. They were trying to propagate their civilization through expansion. She explained. Every transport ship carried not just human passengers, but complete technological databases, manufacturing equipment, and genetic samples necessary to establish self-sufficient human communities. How many ships were involved in this effort? Coalition intelligence identified over 800,000 transport vessels leaving human space during the final weeks of Total War, Zixtala replied, each carrying approximately 1,000 humans and complete civilization infrastructure. The mathematical implications were staggering. Instead of attempting to defend their existing territory, humans were creating hundreds of new human settlements throughout the galaxy. But surely Coalition forces intercepted many of these transports?
We intercepted fewer than 3%, Zixtala admitted.
Human transport ships used the same collective intelligence coordination as their military vessels. They moved through Coalition space with supernatural efficiency, avoiding our patrol routes and detection networks. She showed tracking data revealing the scope of human dispersal. Transport ships had reached star systems across hundreds of parsecs, establishing human communities in locations Coalition forces couldn't effectively monitor or control. By Day 60 of Total War, humans had created over 700 separate colonies throughout the galaxy, Zixtala continued. Each colony was designed to become completely self-sufficient within one standard year. And how did Coalition Command respond to this dispersal? With growing panic, she replied. The Stellar Disruption Protocol was designed to eliminate human civilization by destroying their home system. But if humans had successfully established hundreds of independent colonies, stellar disruption would only eliminate one center of human civilization. She activated strategic analyses showing Coalition Command's growing desperation as they realized the implications of human dispersal strategy. Humans hadn't just developed countermeasures to stellar weapons, Zixtala explained. They had developed countermeasures to extinction itself. By creating redundant populations, by creating evolutionary pressure that would accelerate their collective intelligence development, she corrected. Each human colony would face unique survival challenges that would drive rapid adaptation and innovation. The projection models showed terrifying possibilities. Hundreds of human colonies evolving different technological capabilities, different tactical approaches, different solutions to the challenges of galactic survival. Within one generation, humans would represent hundreds of separate evolutionary paths. Zixtala continued. Any species that threatened one human colony would face retaliation from dozens of others with different capabilities and different advantages. And this realization affected the stellar bombardment timeline? This realization led Supreme Commander Torgeth to accelerate the bombardment to Day 58, she replied. Coalition Command hoped to destroy Sol before human dispersal reached critical mass. Did they succeed? Zixthala's expression grew haunted. They tried. She activated new recordings showing the deployment of Coalition stellar disruption weapons. Massive vessels moving towards Sol, carrying gravitational manipulation devices capable of destabilizing the star itself. The Omega fleet consisted of 12 stellar disruption platforms escorted by 3,000 of the most advanced warships in Coalition inventory, she explained. This represented the largest military operation in galactic history. And the human response? Initially, nothing. Human defensive networks showed no activity in response to Omega fleet deployment. No defensive preparations, no evacuation procedures, no apparent awareness of the approaching threat. They were unaware of the stellar bombardment plan? They were perfectly aware, Zixthala replied. Human intelligence networks had identified the Omega fleet's mission within hours of deployment authorization. Then why no response? Because they were already 47 steps ahead of Coalition strategic planning. She activated recordings from the Omega fleet as it approached Sol. Instead of the expected resistance, human space appeared completely empty. No defensive fleets, no fortified positions, no signs of military activity. The Omega fleet reached Sol system without encountering any human opposition, Zixthala continued. Coalition Command interpreted this as evidence that humans had accepted the inevitability of stellar disruption, but they hadn't. They had done something that Coalition military doctrine considered impossible, she replied. They had achieved perfect strategic surprise against an opponent who knew their exact plans and capabilities.
How? Zixthala's forearms trembled slightly as she prepared to describe what she had witnessed.
By becoming something that our definition of warfare couldn't comprehend. The holographic display shifted to show what happened when the Omega fleet began stellar disruption procedures. Instead of the expected stellar destabilization, something entirely different occurred. When Coalition forces activated the gravitational manipulation devices, Zixthala continued, they discovered that humans had modified Sol's stellar mechanics. Modified how? Humans had spent the previous 3 weeks implementing gravitational engineering throughout the Sol system. When Coalition weapons attempted to destabilize the star, the destabilization energy was channeled through human gravitational networks into a controlled process. The display showed the impossible sight of a star being converted into a massive energy generation system under human control. Instead of destroying Sol, Coalition stellar weapons had turned it into the largest power source in galactic history, Zixthala explained. Under human control. The implication struck the chamber like a physical blow. And what did humans do with this power? Zixthala's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They ended the war. The silence in the tribunal chamber was absolute. Even the soft humming of life support systems seemed to fade, as delegates from 47 species struggled to comprehend what they had just heard. Zixthala stood motionless, her crystalline eyes reflecting depths of memory that spoke of witnessing something beyond conventional understanding of warfare, victory, or survival. The energy output from the converted Sol system exceeded the total power generation capacity of galactic civilization by a factor of approximately 40,000, she began, her voice carrying the weight of impossible mathematics. Humans had access to more raw energy than every other species combined. She activated the holographic display one final time, showing energy readings that made the chamber's translation matrices struggle with numbers that approached theoretical limits of measurement. But they didn't use it for weapons, Zixthala continued, and her words carried a tone that made several delegates lean forward despite themselves. They didn't deploy planet-killing devices or star-destroying weapons. They didn't threaten coalition worlds or demand unconditional surrender. What did they do? Asked the prosecutor, her voice barely above a whisper. They invited coalition command to a conference. The simple statement struck the chamber with more force than any description of massive weapons or military victories. Representatives who had prepared for testimony about human brutality or technological supremacy found themselves confronting something their species' military doctrines had never anticipated. Admiral Chen transmitted a single message to Supreme Commander Torgith, Zixthala explained, activating a recording that would be studied by military strategists for generations. Admiral Chen appeared in the hologram, her expression carrying the same terrible composure that had marked their previous communication. But something had changed. Her presence now seemed to fill not just the communication channel, but the space around it. Supreme Commander, she began, her voice steady but somehow infinite. We need to discuss the future. Admiral, your position is untenable. The Omega Fleet maintains the capability to complete stellar disruption despite your interference. Supreme Commander, the Omega Fleet is welcome to try, Chen replied, and her smile carried depths that made Zixtala's scarring ache across temporal distance. But we've moved beyond the point where such considerations matter. Explain. You attempted to eliminate human civilization through stellar weapons. Instead, you've provided us with the energy necessary to guarantee human survival indefinitely. The Coalition commander's confusion was evident even through universal translation. Admiral, control of one star system, regardless of energy output, cannot defeat Coalition military capabilities. You're thinking too small, Chen replied. We're not interested in defeating Coalition military capabilities. Then what are your objectives? Chen's expression shifted into something that transcended military authority or individual human leadership. When she spoke again, her words seemed to carry the collective voice of human civilization itself. Our objective is to ensure that this war never happens again. Peace negotiations are certainly possible, not peace. Chen interrupted. Evolution. Zixtala paused the recording. What happened next redefined my understanding of what sapient species could become. Describe the human proposal, requested the prosecutor. It wasn't a proposal, Zixtala replied. It was an offer of transformation. She reactivated the recording, Chen's image seeming to radiate authority that transcended individual consciousness. Supreme Commander, humanity has solved the fundamental problem that creates warfare between sapient species, Chen continued. The competition for limited resources, territory, and survival advantages. How? By eliminating the limitations. Chen gestured, and the communication channel filled with technical specifications that made Coalition computers struggle to process the implications. Using the energy available through stellar engineering, humans can provide unlimited resources to every species in the galaxy, she explained. Unlimited energy, unlimited raw materials, unlimited habitable worlds, unlimited space for expansion and growth. That's impossible. It was impossible before humans learned to control stellar mechanics, Chen replied. Now it's simply a matter of implementation. The technical specifications showed plans for converting every star in the galaxy into controlled energy sources, creating resource abundance that eliminated the scarcity driving interspecies competition. But this would require cooperation from every galactic civilization, the Coalition commander protested. No, Chen replied. It requires cooperation from humanity. The statement carried implications that made Zixtala's consciousness recoil even in memory. We're offering to share this technology with every species in the galaxy, Chen continued. Unlimited resources for unlimited expansion. No more competition for survival. No more warfare over territory or materials. And what do you want in return? Chen's smile became something that transcended human expression entirely. Nothing.
Nothing?
Humans don't want territory, resources, or political control, she explained. We want coexistence without the threat of extinction. Zixtala stopped the recording and addressed the tribunal directly. Supreme Commander Tor Geth spent 18 hours consulting with strategic advisors, military analysts, and political leadership from every coalition species. The unanimous conclusion was that Chen's offer represented some form of elaborate deception. What was the coalition's response? Rejection and continued military operations, Zixtala replied grimly. Supreme Commander Torgeth ordered the Omega Fleet to complete stellar disruption protocols despite human interference, and what happened? The Omega Fleet ceased to exist. She activated new recordings showing coalition vessels simply vanishing from sensor networks throughout Sol system, not destroyed by weapon fire or consumed by explosions, but somehow translated out of existence entirely. 12 stellar disruption platforms and 3,000 escort vessels disappeared simultaneously, Zixtala continued. Coalition sensors detected no weapons fire, no energy signatures, no spatial distortions that typically accompany ship destruction. Where did they go? They were relocated. The simple answer created a new wave of shocked whispers throughout the chamber. Relocated where? Asked the prosecutor. To positions throughout the galaxy where they could be safely recovered by Coalition search and rescue operations, Zixtala replied. Every ship, every crew member, completely unharmed, but no longer capable of threatening Sol system. She showed tracking data revealing Coalition vessels appearing at locations thousands of parsecs from their previous positions. Each ship's crew was healthy and uninjured, but their vessels had been stripped of weapons and stellar disruption equipment. Humans had developed technology capable of instantaneous transportation across galactic distances, Zixtala explained. but they used it to preserve Coalition lives rather than eliminate Coalition military capability. How did Coalition Command respond to this demonstration? With the realization that continued warfare was impossible, she activated new strategic analyses showing Coalition military capabilities compared to demonstrated human technologies. The comparison was devastating in its completeness. Humans had achieved technological capabilities that made resistance meaningless, Zixtala continued. They could transport entire fleets across the galaxy instantaneously. They controlled energy sources beyond theoretical limits. They had established hundreds of colonies that Coalition forces couldn't locate or threaten. So Coalition Command surrendered. Coalition Command requested negotiation. The distinction seemed important to Zixtala, who manipulated the hologram to show the final communication between Admiral Chen and Supreme Commander Torgeth. Supreme Commander Torgeth formally acknowledged that Coalition military doctrine had no response to human capabilities, she explained. But he also expressed concerns about human intentions regarding galactic civilization. What kinds of concerns? The concern that humans would use their technological advantages to dominate or control other species. The recording showed Chen's response, her expression carrying patience that seemed infinite. Supreme Commander, humans have no interest in controlling other species, she replied. We're interested in ensuring that no species ever faces extinction threats again. How can you guarantee that human power won't be used oppressively? Chen's answer redefined Zixtala's understanding of power itself. Because human collective intelligence scales with cooperation, not domination, she explained. Our technological capabilities emerge from voluntary coordination among billions of individual humans. Any attempt to use these capabilities oppressively would destroy the cooperation that creates them. She paused, allowing the implications to settle. Humans become more powerful when other species thrive and contribute to galactic civilization. We become weaker when other species are oppressed or threatened. You're saying human interests align with universal prosperity? I'm saying human survival depends on universal prosperity, Chen corrected. Our collective intelligence requires diversity of thought, perspective, and experience. The more successful other species become, the more successful humanity becomes. Zixtala stopped the recording and faced the tribunal directly. This conversation led to what historians now call the Galactic Cooperation Accords. Describe the terms of these accords. Humans provided stellar engineering technology to every species willing to commit to non-aggression protocols. Zixtala explained. Unlimited energy, unlimited resources, unlimited expansion opportunities for every civilization that agreed to resolve conflicts through cooperation rather than warfare.
And species that refuse these terms?
Were left alone, she replied. Humans didn't force participation or punish refusal. Species that chose to continue traditional territorial competition were free to do so, but without access to stellar engineering advantages. How many species accepted the cooperation accords? 44 of the 47 coalition species within the first year. Zixtala replied. The 3 remaining species maintained traditional territorial sovereignty, but agreed to non-aggression protocols. And the results of this arrangement, Zixtala activated displays showing galactic civilization 5 years after the cooperation accords. Instead of the expected human dominance, the data revealed something unprecedented in galactic history. Technological advancement increased by over 3,000% across participating species, she explained. Scientific discoveries that would have required centuries were accomplished in years. Problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia were solved within months. Through human technology? Through cooperative innovation using human energy resources, Zixtala corrected. Humans provided unlimited energy and resources. Other species contributed their unique perspectives, capabilities, and knowledge to shared research projects. She highlighted specific examples from the data. The Vorthax solved gravitational manipulation problems that had challenged human engineers. The Altarians developed quantum communication systems that enhanced human collective intelligence capabilities. The Kethmari contributed biological adaptation technologies that allowed human colonies to thrive in previously uninhabitable environments. Mutual technological advancement? Exponential technological advancement, Zixtala emphasized. Each species' contributions enhanced every other species' capabilities. The result was innovation rates that exceeded the sum of individual species' historical development, and humanity's role in this cooperative civilization. Humans became the galaxy's infrastructure, she replied. They maintained the stellar engineering systems that provided unlimited resources. They coordinated transportation networks that allowed instantaneous travel between star systems. They facilitated communication systems that enabled real-time cooperation across galactic distances.
A service role rather than a leadership role? A foundational role, Zixthala corrected. Humans created the conditions that allowed every other species to achieve their maximum potential. She activated final displays showing current galactic civilization status. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of thriving worlds, scientific advancement beyond previous imagination, conflicts resolved through cooperation rather than warfare. In 5 years, galactic civilization achieved technological and social development that our previous trajectories suggested would require millions of years, Zixthala concluded.
And this is why you requested this tribunal? Asked the prosecutor. I requested this tribunal because the galaxy needs to understand what humans represent, Zixthala replied.
They're not conquerors or dominators. They're not even particularly aggressive by galactic standards.
She paused, her crystalline eyes reflecting light that seemed to come from beyond the chamber itself. Humans are evolution incarnate. They represent the transformation of competition-based survival into cooperation-based thriving. They've shown us that the scarcity driving interspecies conflict isn't inevitable. What do you want the tribunal to conclude from your testimony? Zixthala's forearms moved in a gesture that encompassed the entire chamber, the assembled delegates, and by extension, galactic civilization itself. I want the galaxy to understand that humanity doesn't represent a threat to existing civilizations, she said. They represent the possibility of what civilization could become. And what is that? Unlimited. The words seemed to resonate through dimensions beyond the physical chamber, carrying implications that touched every consciousness present.
Humans have proven that sapient species don't have to compete for survival, Zixthala continued. We can cooperate for transcendence. We can work together to eliminate the limitations that create scarcity, conflict, and extinction threats. You're recommending that other species adopt human methods? I'm recommending that other species consider what humans have offered, she replied. The opportunity to move beyond survival-based civilization to thriving-based civilization. The prosecutor consulted her final notes. Commander, do you have any concluding observations for the tribunal? Zixthala stood silent for several moments, her scarred features reflecting the weight of everything she had witnessed and testified to. When this conflict began, I thought I was studying human military capabilities, she finally said. I discovered that I was witnessing the birth of post-scarcity civilization. Humans didn't win this war through superior weapons or tactics. They won by redefining what victory could mean. Instead of defeating their enemies, they eliminated the conditions that create enemies. Instead of conquering territory, they created infinite territory. Instead of controlling resources, they generated unlimited resources. Instead of dominating other species, they created conditions where every species could thrive beyond their wildest dreams. Her voice took on tones of profound awe that made translation matrices struggle to capture the full emotional context. The galaxy asked whether humans could be monsters, she concluded. The answer is that they chose to be something far more terrifying and far more wonderful. They chose to be the species that makes monsters unnecessary. As Zixthala's words faded into silence, delegates throughout the chamber found themselves confronting a future that their species' histories had never prepared them to imagine. Outside the tribunal chamber, across the galaxy, human stellar engineering systems continued their work, providing unlimited energy and resources to any species willing to reach for cooperation instead of competition. The war was over. Evolution had begun.